I spent my whole damn life in the city. I could go for broke, but the capital is in me. I spent my whole damn life in the city. Anywhere I go, DC's coming with me. I spent my whole damn life in the city. I could go for broke, but the capital is in me. I spent my whole damn life in the city. Anywhere I go, DC's coming with me. I spent my whole damn life in the city. I could go for broke, but the capital is in me.
Welcome, everyone, to District Divided, a DC sports podcast, more specifically, a Washington Commanders podcast. I am Amit. That is KDot. It is the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. We will be providing our predictions for the game. We'll be reviewing last week's wildcard predictions as well. But the focus of this episode being the Washington Commanders podcast that we are, head coaching interviews are now taking place. So there's a lot of smoke around Ben Johnson being the guy. So KDot and I have each found a candidate that we really like, not named Ben Johnson, and we are going to state our facts and opinions as to why that person should be the top candidate, not named Ben Johnson, because the media and all the reports seem to be suggesting that he is the guy. K-Dot, that sound good to you?
Sounds amazing to me.
And you're doing well today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It feels like we're playing like Madden on franchise mode. Like we can do whatever we want to. The sky's the limit. It's blank canvas. The only thing we know is that one of the artistes to help us out during this entire process is Adam motherfucking Peters. We are feeling good. I'm feeling great.
It feels amazing to have some competence in the building. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and get into it? We're going to first begin, guys, with the list of candidates and who all have interviewed so far, who all are scheduled to interview. We'll go from there. So last week, we interviewed two Baltimore Ravens coordinators. We had the defensive line coach, Anthony Weaver, and we had Mike Macdonald, a very hot name that I know KDot has been hammering home for quite some time. Will that be his candidate? You will see in a moment. And that was last week. And then this week, we interviewed Raheem Morris. We interviewed Dan Quinn. Those were yesterday. And today, we are scheduled to interview Ben Johnson. Of course, the very hot Detroit Lions offensive coordinator. That name has been circling around all over the place, and that was before Bill Belichick, Jim Harbaugh, Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, all these names now suddenly available. But nonetheless, you look at the hot trend, which is these young offensive coordinators. Ben Johnson is at the top of that list. He interviews today. Then tomorrow, Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, is going to interview, and then TBD, it's going to be Bobby Slowik, the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. So, K-Dot, are you going first or am I going first for which candidate you want to present?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, sounds good. So if you follow the District Divided Twitter account, which I run, and it's important that you know that, I have been hammering home the idea that my top candidate is Bobby Slowik, the very last person mentioned. Still a TBD as to when he interviews, if he interviews, but I would love for him to interview. Bobby Slowik is my top candidate for this position. Again, this is all excluding Ben Johnson because there's so much smoke around it. Bobby Slowik is 36 years old. He is, again, the Houston offensive coordinator. He was here. He was also one of those coaches that was here in the building from 2010 as a video assistant to 2013. The final 3 years, he was a defensive assistant. This is when Mike Shanahan was head coach. Okay. So he starts on the defensive side of the ball, and he wants to be an offensive coordinator. He wants to be on the offensive side of the ball. But Mike goes, hey, if you want to be really good on the offensive side of the ball, you need to broaden your horizons. You need to broaden your perspective. Focus on the defensive side, see what they're teaching on that side. And from there, you can develop whatever game plan you'd like to. Now, of course, that era doesn't end particularly well with all the RG3 stuff. He's in the news for other reasons. And thank God they're not part of the organization anymore. That's an aside. We'll get to that in the comment mailbag, as we always do. But basically, that regime gets let go. So the Shanahans get let go. Slowik ends up leaving as well. And he goes to Pro Football Focus for a little bit, for 3 years, where he's a senior analyst, and he's helping develop the algorithms, how to think of the game. And he's also there with other people who teach him how to view the game in other ways as well. So Super nerd. Super nerd. We've got a defensive assistant for 3 years. We've got this senior analyst at PFF for 3 years. And then Kyle Shanahan is in San Francisco and goes, Bobby, why don't you come on right back with me as a defensive quality control guy? So he's continuing on the defensive side of the ball from 2017 and 2018. And then he finally gets on the offensive side of the ball. Offensive assistant 2019, 2020. Offensive pass game specialist in 2021. The pass game coordinator in 2022. Particularly good year for San Francisco because Brock Purdy looked pretty good last season. So that's when he was the pass game coordinator. And people were running pretty open in that offense. Yes, it's Shanahan. But when you look at all the other people that have come from that tree, you get a lot of guys running open pretty frequently. Bobby Slowik is one of those guys and one of those proteges. Now he goes to Houston. And this is the most interesting part to me, KDot, because it is, while he has only been an offensive coordinator for 1 year, what he has done over there, I think, is spectacular. It looks like miracle work to me. That Houston Texans team, a lot of people had winning 2 games, 3 games this year as part of a rebuild. I did too. Hand up. It makes total sense, right? Not a good roster. Number 2 overall pick. Rookie QBs historically struggle. And so it's going to take some time. Well, when we do our divisional picks, the Houston Texans are a part of the final 8 in the NFL, and the Houston offense is a big reason why.
Yep.
CJ Stroud is having a historic season, and a lot of that is going to be CJ. I acknowledge that. However, he's being put in amazing positions, and last week against the Cleveland Browns, a historic defense, if you look at it from a yards perspective, in the last 15 years, Bobby Slowik, CJ Stroud, and that offense shredded him. I mean, you talk about an interview where you just knock it out of the park for millions to watch. Bobby Slowik was in his bag.
Yeah, no doubt.
He was absolutely in his bag. So he's working with the rookie quarterback, number 2 overall pick. That sound familiar to you? That might end up being our situation over here. He destroyed a historic defense in Cleveland, and he's been destroying defenses all year. CJ Stroud has been getting better and better and better. And here are the names of the weapons that he's been using. Nico Collins, Tank Dell, now out for the season. John Mechie, Dalton Schultz, Robert Woods.
What?
So no matter what you think of our weapons, they are at the very least, unequivocally at the same level as the Houston Texans. And I think a lot of you would agree that Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson are better than the receivers that they have over there. I would certainly say so. So getting that kind of brain around our offensive pieces, when he's got all these different perspectives, he's got the nerd perspective of PFF, he's got the defensive side of the ball where he's studied it for quite some time and been a part of it for quite some time. And then he finally gets on the offensive side and it's been nothing but excellent. Give me that guy, part of the Shanahan tree. He's an Adam Peters connection. I think it makes a lot, and he's been here. And he was there for that 2012 magical year. He knows how the fan base is. I think he would connect and understand where we're at. I think he's an excellent candidate for this. And I would be over the moon if we ended up choosing to hire Bobby Slowik. KDot.
Nerd.
True. Hand
right,
up. Hand up. You say I'm a numbers guy. Some pretty good numbers supporting him. Okay.
Nerd recognize nerd.
Exactly.
That's that energy we have. Big nerd energy.
Give me Bobby.
So here's the thing. So like as you said in the preface, all this stuff, right? Is that I'm a debater. Like that's where like
You're very good at it. I've lost many debates to you.
Well, I got a college scholarship that I pissed away for debate. But so when you give me that Bobby Slowik thing, the first thing I want to do is like rip it to fucking shreds. But this is not what this is, right? So like there's not I'm not gonna tear down Bobby Slowik because I like Bobby Slowik, right? So like we're in this situation now where all these candidates are candidates that like I'm over the moon to have, right? Like I don't know exactly how to work out, but there's no one that I feel terrible about. I love all these candidates. Like this feel a wealth of riches, right? But we're talking about my guy, the guy that I have come around on. And I think everybody kind of knows where this is going. You've heard me talk about a particular dude for a very, very long time. Eric Bieniemy. No, I'm checking. Yeah.
What a reveal that would be.
That would be amazing. I know people would probably expect me to say Mike Macdonald. And once again, I love all these guys. I love Mike Macdonald. But something was brought to my attention yesterday that I think most of you guys watching were probably in the same mindset until I saw the light. Raheem Morris is my guy. Now, when you hear Raheem Morris' name, right, the initial thought process that I had was, I don't want no coaching retread failure here in Washington, right? And it was the same mentality I had when I was in a convenience store last night and the commander situation got brought up, and a dude that was in line with me, and we were talking about commanders, and he's like, dog, Raheem. And I said the same retread shit. He's like, you ain't done enough research, son. You need to look up your boy Raheem Morris. So after I went to the movie theater and came back home, I opened up YouTube, opened up the computer, started looking at all the Raheem Morris. I am fucking sold. And let me tell you why.
Please do.
This is a dude that I understand. So let's attack that first point, that retread aspect of it, right? Raheem Morris got the head coaching job in Tampa Bay in 2009. He was 33 years old. The first season, absolute dog shit. I mean, they're coming after the John Gruden era, that all that bullshit. Then it's him. They have a rough season year one, but this is also them not knowing what to do with quarterback. Josh Freeman, this kind of second year, double-digit wins. He's got Josh Freeman playing at like a Pro Bowl level. It's fucking insane. Third year around, they start off hot at 4-2. Then the rails come completely off. And they fail tremendously, and Tampa Bay fires him because Greg Schiano, everybody remembers, he was like the hot coaching candidate out of college. They hire him. It goes to shit. Nothing fucking happens from that. But Raheem Morris is looked upon as just a pure failure in the NFL. But if you look at that, if you look at like the way that things went down and how young he was, I look at that and I say that it's not just a regular like coaching retread failure sort of thing. This is not Dan Quinn. The dude was 33 years old when he got the job. A thing, if you listen to him talk about it, he knows that he did things not necessarily the right way. And I like that. I like a guy that has gone through the process of knowing what not to do and can learn from it. You look at all these dudes that are known as great head coaches right now. Look at their failures. Look at Bill Belichick's failures early on in Cleveland. Look at Pete Carroll's failures when he was head coach of the New York Jets, like before he then came on. It's dudes that learn from their mistakes. But beyond that, and that's just my point as far as the retread thing, is that do not treat him like just another retread. When you get into the nitty gritty of his career is when you realize there is not a dude with a more interesting resume, maybe in the entire NFL, than Raheem Morris. So he's about a guy that comes in, does the college route stuff for a little bit, defense about Hofstra, Cornell, stuff like that. Comes in the league. He's in Tampa Bay with John Gruden. He's defensive quality control coach under Monte Kiffin. Monte Kiffin, legendary motherfucking defensive coach. Lane Kiffin, John Gruden, those guys, other guys on that staff, Mike fucking Tomlin. These dudes were dudes down there in Tampa Bay. He played with the light. He was coaching guys like John Lynch and Derek Brooks and Warren Sapp. All these dudes down in Tampa Bay, they were dogs. And all these guys talk glowingly about him and how much he meant to them. When he's there in Tampa Bay, at least early on, they have tremendous success, at least on the defense. I know people look at the talent and everything, but what I want you to do is remember when I go through these lists is who he's been around. John Gruden, Monte Kiffin, Mike Tomlin, the other guys they had on that defense, right? Even guys like John Lynch, who were leaders, he had to know how to navigate that. We're looking at John Lynch as the dude that hired Adam Peters. He knows this guy, right? So leaves Tampa Bay, or he becomes the head coach of Tampa Bay. We already went through what happened there. He leaves Tampa Bay, goes to a team that Bobby Slowik knows well, the Washington Redskins. He's here in Washington being the secondary coach from 2012 to 2014. That coaching staff that everybody keeps looking at is like, oh my God, all these dudes that was here. Raheem was here too. He was here working with Kyle Shanahan, working with all the guys that are on that list. They all love each other. Like, these are dudes that are really, really close. And Raheem was a huge part about it. If there's one thing, and I'll skip forward just a little bit, if you want to know a lot about Raheem, go online, the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark. He does an hour-long episode with Ryan, Fred, and Shannon Crowder. And you hear the way that Ryan Clark talks about this dude. You hear the way that he controlled, or he had say as far as in that locker room, and the rapport that he had with the players. These dudes would run through walls for him. They love him to death. And that positive that you said about Bobby Slowik with somebody that knew what was happening here in Washington, he knows, he gets it, he understands. After he leaves Washington being the secondary coach, which also from a statistical standpoint, a lot of people remember that was a Jim Haslett defense, right? But that secondary, 3.3% interception rate in that secondary at the time that he was here. That's high as shit. 3.3% is a pretty good fucking number as far as interceptions go. That unit played their asses off. They had a lot of other issues, but that unit played like fucking crazy. Outside of him leaving there, he goes to Atlanta. When he goes to Atlanta, he starts out as a defensive assistant, defensive passing game coordinator, and he flips sides. Same thing you gave credit for Bobby Slowik. Raheem Morris turns the offense under Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta and is the passing game coordinator and receivers coach. Now, a lot of people say, well, he had Julio Jones. But what you also know is all the secondary guys that they had that came, Mohamed Sanu and the tight ends, all these dudes that ended up being studs there in Atlanta. And that offense was prolific. He was right there working with Kyle, hand in hand on the offense. This is a dude that's already, and we're talking about years ago, already has both sides of the football in his mind and has had success and already has a Super Bowl under his belt. Remember that from Tampa Bay. Knew the dudes, got tons of time with Kyle Shanahan and what it is they did there. He spent time in Atlanta. After Kyle leaves as far as offensive coordinator, they have what's his name was the head coach Atlanta for a minute. Dan Quinn, who's another one of the candidates. Dan Quinn has the head coaching job in Atlanta. He gets fired after going 0-5 to start the season. Raheem takes over. These motherfuckers go 4-7 the rest of the way, including going, I think, 4 in a row, and then the wheels kind of fell off. They're from a talent standpoint, injury standpoint, whatever. But you could see he took a Dan Quinn team and had them win immediately. Once again, talent, everything kind of evens everything out. But you could see the dudes played hard for him over Dan Quinn. So when you're thinking about Dan Quinn, and I don't have a lot of negative to say about Dan Quinn, you just got to remember that aspect of it. Raheem took a Dan Quinn team and had more success with him. Everybody thought he should deserve the job in Atlanta. They don't give it to him. Whatever. He leaves, ends up being the defensive coordinator for the LA Rams, which is where he is now.
Right.
Working under Sean McVay. Another name that we fucking love. Another coaching tree that we fucking love outside of Brandon, outside of LA Chargers, man. Beyond that, guys that have had pretty success. LaFleur, O'Connell, those guys. Dudes from Washington from that era, right? He wins a Super Bowl with the LA Rams. And one of the craziest stories that I heard was the Eric Weddle story. Eric Weddle, everybody remembers, comes back after spending 2 years outside of the league to then come back and play with the Rams, and he helps them win a Super Bowl. Raheem's the one that called him. Raheem's the one that called Eric Weddle while he was sitting on the couch, chilling. And he said, hey, are you fat? That's what he saw. He called him, are you fat? Eric's like, no. Well, we need you. You ready? And he yeah, coach. Let's go. Let's fucking go. And Eric Weddle comes in. He's wearing the green dot. He called the defense all the way through the Super Bowl. It's fucking nuts. And if you look at what they do in LA, look, LA's ranking as far as where it is they are on defense, that's not what he looks for. He looks for ways to win the game. If you look at LA, especially this year on the playoff run of it, that secondary has kind of come alive on this fucking run. That's what he does. He knows how to motivate and get guys on a certain level. But I think along that entire long diatribe that I just went on, what you want to look at is all the dudes that he has got to be in rooms with. All the guys that love him. There's not one person that has anything negative to say about Raheem Morris. And we talk about from a head coaching standpoint and what Washington needs. I get the idea of having an offensive-minded guy. I get the idea of having a defensive-minded guy. What I love is the idea of a guy who knows both, but more importantly, has the connections across the league to build a coaching staff that'll be fucking top-notch. This dude knows everybody. Everybody. When you're trying to put together an entire coaching staff, you want somebody with the connections to put together the best unit. And if you have strong ties to McVay's guys, strong ties to Shanahan's guys, strong ties to Mike Tomlin's guys, that to me, when you're in that room and you're Adam Peters saying, all right, well, what does your coaching staff look like? Raheem Morris could pull out his phone, start scrolling and say, I can call any one of these motherfuckers and they'll come here.
You could even get Eric Weddle if you really wanted to. So one lot there. One question I have is, okay, so we've talked about, I really liked the way, before I get to the question, I really liked the reframing of retread that you did there, right?
Yep.
That first off, not all are created equal. It's
Right.
not just Josh McDaniels as the poster child. Like Belichick went to Cleveland, it didn't work.
Right.
Pete Carroll with the Jets, it didn't work.
Right.
I like that. And so Raheem Morris now becomes more appealing. He was in the building, as you had mentioned, from 2012 to 2014, incredibly well connected. And having been so young, which I can now sort of think about with Bobby Slowik, right? Having been so young his first time and it not working, that shouldn't immediately be like, oh, okay, it's Raheem Morris. Like,
Right.
it was nice to get into the details there. One question I do have, KDot, and it's a question that everybody's got.
Rock and roll.
Would we run into the Houston situation right now? Right, where Raheem becomes the head coach. Oh, one last thing, leader of men, which is what these guys talked about.
Mm-hmm.
This guy passes that in space. You talk about running through a wall for the guy. You nailed that.
Yep.
But what about the potential for changing offensive systems? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts there?
It's not my, so that's the thing. I'm not concerned because the idea is when you have a guy, once again, I love Bobby Slowik. I love Ben Johnson. I love Mike Macdonald. But if I have to ask those guys to completely form what their coaching staff looks like, I don't think they have the reach. They just haven't been around long enough. So like when you're talking about like, how do you develop that completely, right? Raheem has ties to players and coaches currently in the league or outside of the league that all want, that a lot of guys want their shot and want their opportunity, right? As far as building that bench of depth on both sides of the ball, I can't think of anyone that could have more than that. So like the idea is like if you get an offensive coordinator for him, which I would look at like some of the Rams guy like Zach Robinson, some of those guys that are like Raheem has the dudes that'll be like, hey, Zach or whoever, what do you need as far as quarterbacks coach, running backs coach, tight end, wide receiver that we can have that are part of the system you're trying to build? And if said guy takes off and goes somewhere else, you can elevate the next guy to continue with the system in which you have. You don't have to do it over.
So if I could boil down your answer, it is Raheem is so well connected and he's been around so many of these offensive minds. I'm considering Raheem more of a defensive guy.
Yeah.
That he can, and accurately, we'll make that assumption as well, bring in the right offensive staff. It's not just an OC. Right. And then that will take care of itself. That's self-sustaining. So that is your solution 100%. To the defensive-minded coach. So like, let's say we took a Bobby Slowik from Houston. That must be D'Amico's thinking, which is now we have the offensive staff in place. We'll just elevate the next guy and we'll continue with CJ Stroud.
Right. But that's the thing is like the idea of what Raheem does compared to what Bobby does, right, is that Raheem just has more of the guys he can call. He has multiple stops across the league with different coordinators and different head coaches. He's got connection. And then even beyond that, the players, which I think is something that everybody needs to really remember, is like you look at the Lions team, you think about all the former players that are guys in position coaching staff, right? Like the fact that Raheem has those guys too, he knows the dudes that you need to call to give a shot for this coaching job or give this, that. His ability to create depth in coaching is to me what screams out more than anything. Because I wouldn't look at him as primarily a defensive or primarily an offensive coach. What I look at him as a motivator of men, an amazing communicator, incredible communicator. You might not find a better communicator in coaching outside of him, maybe Sean McVay. Because even Kyle struggles with some aspects of communication. He can be a bit of a dickhead. I love Kyle, but he's a bit of a dick. The idea is that you have somebody that can talk to anybody and has good relationships with everybody. And if you got some dudes that are like, hey, I want to give a shot at coaching, you could do that. He knows them all. There was a moment in the podcast that like blew my mind when I was comparing it to the current regime. They were talking about one of the depth guys on the LA Rams as far as the Super Bowl run. And they were like, yeah, you got this dude. He's like 28 years old. And Raheem's like, he's 26. He knows a birthday. Like the dude, like that alone, it was that little moment. And I'm like, what? There was a moment where Shannon Crowder was talking about all the fun they had in Miami. This month, he listed like 3 dudes where Shannon was like, you know about them. Like he knows and there's not a single person with anything bad to say. He removes his ego from this. Like if you listen to him now compared to like when he was a head coach in Tampa Bay, I see growth, true growth. And that to me is like the only way to really learn at things, if you listen to any of the platitudes or anything, is to fail sometimes. You got to fail and know what not to do sometimes, right? Just constant success is not necessarily good for everybody, because what happens when you have to face adversity? You don't know. Raheem has it, and he's still only 47 years old.
Right. That's the other thing. He is young, right? We look at all these offensive guys and how young they are, and that becomes young, that all of a sudden 47 becomes old, and that's not true at all. Right. Like, it's just, this has been an exceptional run of younger guys that has taken place on the offensive side of the ball. Like, McVay was 30, I want to say, when he was hired. Like, that's crazy. So that shouldn't suddenly be the standard, but sort of is becoming, just because it's a copycat league, it's a trends league. 47 is young.
To think that Raheem Morris, if he got hired to be head coach, could be head coach in Washington for the next 20 years and still be younger than Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick is
currently. That, yeah, absolutely incredible. So I enjoyed the pitch. I enjoyed the pitch on Raheem. I enjoyed hearing all the different names he's been with, and he himself also being a name. And I think it's important to say that too, because we go, oh, he's been with McVay. He's been with, this man is good in his own right, quite clearly, based on what KDot spelled out for you guys. The last little bit I'll say in favor of Bobby is that, before we move on to the divisional round picks, is that he is now, to me, done this in back-to-back years with rookie quarterbacks. And there's a very strong chance we have a rookie QB. His ability to help make, again, pass game coordinator when Brock Purdy is a rookie, and then offensive coordinator with CJ Stroud as a rookie. And both are doing really well. Both are in the divisional round. I would love for our rookie QB, assuming we take one at pick 2, that is an assumption, or at pick 9 if we moved out, whatever, that they are as comfortable as possible and can grow together. That's all I wanted to say there. Yes, KDot.
Once again, I was up real late watching Raheem Morris stuff last night. 2013 Redskins making a comeback in 2024 under Adam Peters and the new regime. Kirk Cousins is your quarterback. Raheem Morris is your coach.
Oh my!
I'm
Lord.
just saying.
Yep, yeah, and I'm just saying it's time for divisional round picks, because I'm not ready.
Bro,
for that
I'm
conversation.
saying, look, dude, I don't know.
You press the Kirk button.
I'm
you press the Kirk button.
I'm telling
That's
everybody.
what you did. You pressed the Kirk button.
I'm telling everybody though. If you go ahead, seconds. you too. If you go watch his interview with the Pivot, don't even get halfway through. You'll be sold. I promise you'll be sold.
Oh, the Pivot does a fabulous job, by the way.
Just listening to him,
I will listen.
You will be sold.
Let's move on to divisional round picks, where we have 4 games. Last week, KDot, I don't know if you were keeping track of our records in the wild card.
I was.
How do we do? Because it was a wild one. It was a wild one.
Yeah. I told you guys I didn't really have a whole lot of confidence in what I was doing, but
we'll see how it compares to this coming weekend.
Well, you went 3-3. You had the Texans, Chiefs, and Bills correct. You got the Cowboys, Rams, and Eagles wrong.
Okay, cool. So I will stick to the AFC side of things. Please continue.
I went 2-4. I got the Chiefs and Bucks correct. I got nothing else correct.
Okay, so 3-3, 2-4. I've got a game lead so far, but there are plenty of games left. Beginning with KDot, the Houston Texans, led by CJ Stroud, Bobby Slowik in that offense, D'Amico Ryans, fabulous job as head coach this season. If you listen to the mic'd up stuff, telling Christian Harris, hey, play the quarterback, you're going to get your opportunity, and next thing you know, it's a pick 6. Very, very cool content. Houston Texans go to Baltimore, Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Who you got in this one, KDot?
Houston is in uncharted territory. No one can predict, based on anything prior history, what it is that Houston's going to do. They've thrown the rule book out. I don't think they beat the Baltimore Ravens at home in the playoffs. So give me the Ravens, but anything can happen with this Texans team.
Anything can happen with this Texans team. Absolutely right. They actually did play earlier
yeah.
this year. It was week 1.
Mhm.
And so you had a rusty Lamar Jackson. That was what he tweeted. Rusty as fuck, but thankful that we got the dub. Good to be back. The Texans only put up 9 points. The Ravens ended up putting up 25, so it's 25-9. This Ravens defense, and this is a credit to Mike Macdonald, any single time they've gone up against somebody and there's been some hype around it. Ben Johnson, top candidate for us right now. His Lions put up 6 points against the Ravens. Ravens put up 38. How about the Seattle Seahawks when they were the 2 seed at the time going to Baltimore? Well, they put up 3 points when the Ravens put up 37 points. Lamar Jackson's going to be your MVP. They are my Super Bowl pick. I could see them getting off to a slow start against a Houston Texans team that's feeling themselves right now, but I do expect them to get the job done. Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, the spine is built. We're starting to hear about the spine needing to be built for us as well here in Washington. Baltimore is as ready as they've ever been. They got some playoff demons to exercise. I think this is a victory for them that helps in their championship run here. So I've got the Baltimore Ravens as well. KDot. Now we move to the night game with another team that is so young they don't know what they don't know and have given us a gift of a celebration last week in beating the Dallas Cowboys at Jerry World. The Green Bay Packers go to San Francisco to take on the 1-seeded 49ers. Who you got there?
Give me San Francisco. And the only context I'm going to give to this, outside of San Francisco, in my opinion, is the best team in this entire bracket, is the if San Francisco embarrasses Green Bay, it makes the Cowboys loss even more embarrassing.
I don't think there's any, because San Francisco's already embarrassed Dallas. I get what you're getting at.
But I mean, you were talking about days after they're like, we're keeping McCarthy.
Sure. I know. Which we can get into that after the pod as well, because I've gotten a mixed bag. You know, we start talking to people about the NFL in general.
Yeah.
I've gotten a mixed bag. Some people are like, hey, I'm really glad they kept Mike McCarthy because they feel he's the guy and can get it done in Dallas, and others are like, they should have moved on, like good to great, etc. We'll talk about that. I've got the San Francisco 49ers, and the reason I have the 49ers is because they are going to commit to running, which Dallas should have. But instead, they decided to. Tony Pollard was finally finding a little bit of space, and they go, no, but Dak's got to do this. They had the Dak CD thing. That was kind of weird. Still don't really know what was going on over there. But here's the thing. If Brock Purdy and Debo have a thing, well, he's still got Kittle and Ayuk, so he's going to be totally fine. I think the Packers might surprise and put up some points, but not nearly enough. I've got the 49ers. I got them covering as well. It's a 10.5 point spread. So the San Francisco 49ers, that one we are both in agreement so far. Let's move on to Sunday's games. And these ones are a bit more, the spreads are closer. There's reason for chaos in both games. Tampa Bay goes to Detroit. Detroit, after all the fuss about the Cowboys ending and how they were going to have to go to Dallas, now host in the divisional round, which is all they were really hoping for this whole time. And they get to play Baker Mayfield and this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. Who do you have, KDot?
Give me the Lions. I love Baker. I love Baker. But I do realize what they did to Philadelphia. But that Philadelphia team, I told you guys after the Jason Kelce, Travis Kelce podcast, they were not going to win that game. They gave up. Like they gave up before they walked through the tunnel. So I think it'll be a little bit different. And that Lions home crowd was fucking awesome. I just feel as though the Lions just have more to do. And they will make it there to the NFC Championship game.
Okay. Make it 3 for 3. I've also got the Detroit Lions. Now, Tampa Bay does have a lot more experience than people are giving them credit for. This like, oh man, they're happy to be there. They've got championship pedigree. They've got a number of guys who were on that roster when Brady was there and they ended up winning the whole thing. So this idea that they're going to go to Detroit and be afraid of, this environment and how loud it was. No, they won't. But I do think that the Lions are better. They already beat Tampa Bay earlier this season. Regular season versus playoffs, we know the difference. Dallas showed us that. History can matter. But there's something about this Lions team. Give me Detroit in that one. 3 for 3. And now the one where maybe we differ, maybe. Kansas City goes to Buffalo. And this is a fun one. It is just a 2.5-point spread. Once again, crazy snow in Buffalo. $20 an hour. If you got a shovel and you're over there and you're listening to this spot, make some money real quick. You can help get the stadium ready to roll. Who do you have in this one, KDot? This is 6 p.m. on Sunday.
So, it's like I told you guys last week, the Buffalo was either going to they'd be really close in the fourth quarter, and I felt good about the pick, or it was just not going to be close, and it wasn't really close. Buffalo on any given Sunday is the absolute best team. They are. When they're playing like they just played, they're the best team. I'm not picking against Patrick Mahomes. I refuse to do so. Just give me the motherfucking Chiefs. And my guy, Isaiah Pacheco. Oh, love him. Chiefs.
This is a must-win game for Buffalo on so many levels. So you've got that Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes rivalry in that they're 3-3 against each other, but playoffs are what matters.
Mm-hmm.
Mahomes is 2-0. This is Mahomes' first road game.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time in the playoffs that Patrick Mahomes is going to be on the road. Buffalo worked hard for that 2 seed. They've won 6 in a row. They got the 2 seed. It is going to be an electric atmosphere over there in Buffalo.
No doubt.
6 p.m. The crowd is going to be really into it. I don't trust Josh. And I think he is going to press a little bit. I think there's going to be... This Chiefs defense is real, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is really, really good. L'Jarius Sneed, I think, proved last week absolute snub for... I don't remember if it was All-Pro, Pro Bowl, or both. But L'Jarius Sneed is a dog. Tyreek Squirts. Cheetah Squirts. I mean, give me Kansas City in this one. I want it for Buffalo. And the reason this is important for Buffalo to win is because if they don't, this whole Allen Mahomes thing, it's similar to Dallas being this Super Bowl caliber team. I'm not going to believe you anymore. If he goes 0-3, and this time he gets him at home, and now Josh Allen on his resume has lost to Joe Burrow at home and Patrick Mahomes at home. What are you going to sell me on? So give me Kansas City, but Buffalo needs this, KDot. They absolutely need this one.
I think it might be in their best interest to lose this one, fire Sean McDermott, and go hire Bill Belichick.
Well, I don't know that they're actually going to do that.
They won't.
Anyway, we go over to the comment mailbag. So we are in total agreement. I don't know what that means for the state of the world, but we're in total
means that
agreement.
we're not gonna. This is.
We're going over for 4, aren't we? Hey, I'm looking forward to it.
Famous.
We go over to the comment mailbag as we always do, where we have 7 comments, and we appreciate you guys for the comments as always.
Thank you.
We begin with D Mike. Shout out D Mike.
D Mike.
Great pod, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thoroughly appreciate it. That is the comment, KDot.
Oh, thanks, bud.
Yeah, thoroughly appreciate that. We then go over to Earl Bruce. Shout out, Earl.
Bruce.
Green Bay is the youngest team in the playoffs. With all the new players the Commanders will have, I believe that next year they will assume that position. How long before they make the playoffs? Thanks for the shout out, guys. Well, Earl, we will always shout you out. And to answer your question, how long before we make the playoffs? If you're looking at the state of the NFC East, if you're looking at the fact that we have adults in the room, it could be as early as next year. It can be. If you get the coaching staff right and you actually hit on a couple draft picks, which feels like it's been a while since we've done that, you can turn around quickly in this division. It is a historical division of turnover, of change, over and over and over again. It can happen as early as next year. I hope it does. But I'm going to reserve judgment until I see a bit more. KDot, what about you?
I have a 3-year window.
3-year window.
Yeah, I have 3 years looking for upward trajectory. But yeah, I go 3 years because like Eagles team is talented. They just need more of it in certain positions. That Dallas team needs a kick in the ass, but they're clearly fucking talented.
They got a kick in the ass, to be fair.
They got their asses kicked.
Is that not?
And a little different.
Ass kicked?
A little different.
Okay.
Kicking the ass puts some pep in your step. And ass kicking removes all pep.
Okay. No pep.
No pep. Unless you're Dak Prescott on the weirdest martyrdom ever. If you got to fire him, you got to fire me. All right, motherfucker.
You know, a lot of
All right.
Dallas fans were like, cool. That made our job a lot
Go.
easier. Your words.
Fucking
But,
hell.
we'll get into that after the pod, of course. All right. So we got a 3-year window. I'm saying as early as next year if we get stuff right, but I'm going to reserve judgment until after head coach, the draft, figuring out if we even have an identity. I would hope we do.
And if Kirk
We go
Cousins
over.
playing quarterback.
No, we're not doing that. And then we go to Tony.
Tony.
Shout out Tony. R.I.P. MLK was funny as fuck. Honestly, forgot about that for a moment. I got another text from a buddy who also listened to the pod and was also cracking up at that moment. Was Skip Bayless right about Baker Mayfield after all these years?
Well, considering that I was right there with Skip the entire way, I'm a Bake guy through and through. And I think one of the best things that happened to Bake was his little stint in LA last year. I think when you hear about him and McVay and the way that they kind of got along and the way that he addressed them, I think it allowed Baker to kind of get out of his own head. Because there was so much shit in Cleveland. It was so much shit in Cleveland. And it's just, look, I love Baker. The thing is, when we talk about like quarterbacks and looking for what it is you're looking for when you want to draft or anything, I look for adversity, man. I look at what did you have to get through. And if you follow Baker's entire career, the motherfucker has faced adversity. He's got nothing handed to him. He earns his shit. And I will always appreciate that about him.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think, well, on the subject of Skip for a moment, he loves a underdog white story. He loved Johnny Manziel, loved Baker Mayfield. He does.
No, I agree. I wasn't with him on the Manziel thing.
Yeah, neither was I.
Football.
And Baker, I enjoyed his own swagger at Oklahoma and stuff like that. He's a fun, like personable QB, if you will. Like you can root for the guy. He's playing great right now. He is playing great right now. And he entered the season playing for his almost NFL career as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, back against the wall, he proved that he can play. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, yes, Skip was right. And I think a lot of people had that same opinion. And so we go over now to Blood Clot. Shout out Blood Clot. Three comments. Three comments over here. So we will first begin with this one. KDot, at least Josh Harris isn't drinking the water bottle with two hands like a certain past president. In response to your Nick Fury response, definitely early Nick Fury, or maybe Josh Harris, Thanos collecting Infinity Stones. What do you make of that, KDot?
I don't want him to be Thanos, like promise you that. Maybe we could work on the Nick Fury stuff. We'll see. The jury's out. We'll figure out what it was. What was the first thing he said? Because that was something that
he was talking about Josh Harris drinking water.
Oh, there is him using both hands to do the water, just like old Orange Man. If I can find the video of it, I will send it to Amit so you can put it on something, or at least tweet about it. But I do recall him doing the bit, and it's
And then we have
love
another
you,
from. We do love you, Josh, and appreciate it. We do have another from Blood Clot. Two more from Blood Clot. One of them is: can you imagine if it's Detroit versus Houston or Buffalo in the Super Bowl? I would love it if one of these guys won their first championship, but I'm hoping the Lions take it. Get out. Who are you hoping takes it? So, like, in a similar vein, like throwing in Houston in the Super Bowl, one might say is unrealistic right now, right? But who do you want to take the Super Bowl?
If I had to pick one above all else, it'd probably be Baltimore for very selfish reasons. I live in Baltimore, and when the Ravens are good and the Ravens are playing, there's less crime.
Okay, there you go. And I want Baltimore because I love Lamar. I picked him as my MVP, and I picked him to win the Super Bowl before the start of the season. So give me Baltimore. I want to be right.
That's the thing is, like, Lamar being vindicated.
Yes,
would
he
be
still goes
awesome.
through it, man. He still goes through it.
Lamar being like, fuck you guys. What do you have to say now? What do you have to say now about it?
Talk about that gamble, too. And all the NFL teams coming out and saying publicly, which was crazy, we are not interested. I don't know. I mean, Lamar could really just throw up a couple middle fingers to everybody by winning this one. And I want that for him. I do.
Totally.
And then we go over to Blood Clot with his final comment. When you mentioned how there were really good questions asked, I immediately thought of that one question you brought up. I was half listening to the interview while working, And when they asked him what he thought of the current roster, I made a Tim the Toolman / Scooby-Doo noise as I raised my head. What do you think of the current roster? And I think the response was hilarious. I'm glad he didn't give a soft, automated response, but instead took a long pause, thought about it, and acknowledged there were a few cornerstone pieces, but there was work to be done. Still early, but I'm really intrigued at what this organization can look like with competent people in control. With our draft capital, cap space, and new ownership management, this feels like a clean slate. Hallelujah. Amen. All of the above. We are in a good place because, blood clot and shout out for all those comments. We go over to a past life. Vindo writes, shout out Vindo. Sorry for bringing this up again, but Jay took the high road in the beef and apologized, something RG3 would never do. This was written before the most recent exchange about race a pigeon and all that jazz. Couch, first wife, and kids for IG model is crazy, not going to lie. The RG3 Jay Gruden thing. KDot, go ahead.
All right, number one, this is Vindo.
This is Vindo.
Vindo, sorry, what you did, the apology you're talking about was sarcasm. It was Jay Gruden wasn't really apologizing. He said, sorry, the staff wasn't good enough for you. That's the 2013 staff that we all know was legendary.
But his staff wasn't that.
Well, 2014, it was
It
still
still had guys.
It still had
guys.
It was sarcasm. It was still McVay and all the rest. It was a lot of fucking.
But a lot of those guys weren't there. I just want to make
not all of them were there. There were still a lot of guys there.
Enough was there.
Yeah. So yeah, that was pure sarcasm. They're not gonna stop. The best take on all of this has been Will Compton, who released his video last night. Will Compton, one of my favorite Washington players as far as when he was here.
Was there during this.
Was there in the locker room with the butthole tightening meeting that they all had. Look, man, I've been saying, there is a lot of bodies buried on both sides of this thing. And the only thing I can think of when I see all of this, when I'm seeing the junkies put up a poll, whose side are you on? The level of dysfunction, if this franchise is fucking embarrassing. The fact that these two guys are doing what it is they're doing right now is fucking embarrassing. The fact that everyone just can't own up to the fact you collectively all let us down, let yourselves down, let the team down with your nonsense. Just own it. Just own it.
KDot, if I may, I just want to pat ourselves on the back here because we could easily put out a video on RG3 Gruden being a DC sports podcast, more specifically a Washington Commanders podcast, and probably do numbers and get a number of subscribers. That is not what I want this to be. I'm so glad that these guys are gone out of the building. Like, it is just a reminder of how poorly run and the level of dysfunction that was allowed. And honestly encouraged when you look at all the different shenanigans that were taking place, too. Not just shenanigans, very serious allegations and stuff like that taking place in the org. I'm just glad it's over.
There are two things I'll say. And this, I shouldn't do this.
Go for it.
Capri Bibbs.
Yep.
Trent Williams' birthday.
Okay.
All you need to know.
That one I don't. Oh, yes. Yes. Now I do. Gosh. Anyway, I'm just glad we're not in those days anymore. But that's the common mailbag. This was District Divided, a DC sports podcast, more specifically a Washington Commanders podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episodes where we revealed our top candidates, not named Ben Johnson, who again seems to be the front runner at this time. If you enjoyed the episode, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, comment as you always do, and KDot.
Share this shit. Morris Cousins 2024.
And on that note, after the pod begins right now. No, I do not want that. I'm no Kirk Cousins here. He's gotten a lot better over time. I acknowledge that. Sweet guy. Quarterback series was cool. But you talk about good to great. Not seeing it.
I'll tell you this right now. If Atlanta hires Bill Belichick, and if Belichick does what I think is the right move to do, which is to go get Kirk Cousins, they're winning a Super Bowl.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay.
I'll believe it when I see it. It does look like Bill Belichick is going to go to Atlanta,
Mhm.
which is an exciting spot because I do think, and you've mentioned it back-to-back years now, how they have a very exciting team, bunch of young pieces. Arthur Smith seemed to play anti-fantasy football, if you will, which was try everything possible to not get your best players the ball. It was shocking at times. Like Kyle Pitts has been there for a couple years now, and each time you see him make a catch, you're like, my God. First off, because the throw was terrible, whether it be Desmond or a favorite of mine, Taylor Heineke.
Mhm.
It just Kyle Pitts has been struggling over there, and I don't think it's his fault necessarily. Then there's Drake London. Bijan will I don't know. It was a whole lot. Bijan ended up actually getting the ball a whole bunch, so I don't want to be totally unfair. But man, it was very confusing as to why they wouldn't get those guys the ball more.
I like Arthur Smith as a dude,
Yeah,
but
he's a
I
fun
think
dude.
when you look through Arthur Smith's history, you get to a point where, I'm being completely honest, you wonder why they have the job.
Sure. There are a lot of people in the league over the course of time where you wonder why they had the job, and we're the poster child for it historically.
Yeah, I'd say that to a certain degree. I think people look at like what he did with Tannehill when Tannehill first came over and like the Mariota shit and whatever. Derrick Henry's what made that offense run, and what they had at wide receiver made that offense run. And even when he was with a tight ends coach before then, and if you would like that, they always had studs at tight ends. So I don't know. I don't want to call it nepotism if you know who his family is, but tracks. But I like Arthur Smith. I think Arthur Smith can be somebody in this league. I just don't think he was at all prepared or ready to be a head coach.
I think it showed
Yeah.
ultimately. So I'm curious to see Belichick, assuming that goes through. I mean, who knows these days? Um, assuming that goes through, it will be fun to see
That'd be
Belichick
awesome.
with the Atlanta Falcons in a pretty weak division overall. I know Tampa Bay's in the divisional round, but like you said, they played a Philadelphia team that looked more interested in the season ending than playing that game and being in Tampa Bay. I don't know what the heck's going on over there, KDot. I don't know that that's just coaching. Like that level of collapse to me, and all the cryptic stuff coming out of the locker room and Jalen going, you don't know what you don't know. You wonder if something happened in the locker room that's not just coaching. Because I have never seen a team, especially that talented. They started 10-1, K-Dot. They didn't suffer such significant injuries. Like last year, I'm forgetting the name of their then rookie D tackle, but they lost him, and all of a sudden they couldn't stop the run. And it was like, okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that injury was big, and they started to struggle, and they still made the Super Bowl. But this year, I can't recall them actually losing anybody, and all of a sudden it just fell apart. The coordinators I get, but they were still 10-1.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and they beat good teams. So I don't know what the heck happened, but it seems like it's not just coaching. I'm not saying coaching is 0%. It's a pretty large part of it, but this seems beyond it to me.
Pendulum swinging. So like if you look at a lot of those games that they were winning, at least early on, I think they have like one actual blowout against a good team, and that's the 31-17 Miami win. I saw that they lose to the Jets in
They
that
beat the
10-1 game.
Chiefs, beat the Bills.
To beat a Chiefs team,
I don't know
4
how they
points.
beat the Bills. Shout out Jake Elliott.
I get, but what I'm saying is close, really, really close. And with the tush pushes and when they go for it here and there and what they're doing as far as running, look, I think there are a few things wrong. Number one, I'm always going to go with the coordinators just were a downgrade over what they had previously.
Yeah.
That's one. Number two is key injuries and personnel changes from last year to this year around defensive back and linebacker. Look at that as number two. Number three is you're right as far as something with the locker room. I think this is a team that is weirdly constructed in a sense. And they have a lot of really good vet leaders on that team. You're talking about Jason Kelsey, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson. Like they got dudes that have been around forever. There is one, I forget if it was this year or last year, but there was at one point, they're like in a TV timeout or something, they're doing a review, and you see Nick Sirianni like doing the first down, and Jalen Hurts takes his hand, put it down, like, what are you doing? Don't do that. There's a little bit of immaturity from Nick Sirianni that I think is weird for that locker room. I think that there is an element of some of the older guys not knowing if they want to stick around, not stick around, what they got to be for the younger crowd. There's also, like, if you're Jason Kelce or some of these other guys, like, you have the Super Bowl from a few years back. You want to see it again, right? But how much do you really want to do for it when you know you could go do something else and just stop? Then you get like the AJ Brown piece of this, which is there was little rumblings here and there, like players only meetings or him not wanting to blame the coaches to blame the players. There's also this element of, like, I keep going back to Super Bowl hangover, man. There are a lot of times when after a Super Bowl, you get a team, especially a team that might not be the most veteran as far as in their overall presence, that are like, hey, we did enough last year. We know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's not the way it works. And if there is a chasm between like the vets trying to school those dudes on something and they're not listening, you're not going to go anywhere.
Listen, that's fair. When we talked about even this draft and Jalen Carter falling to them and Howie Roseman being this excellent GM, they got DeAndre Swift early on. That looked like that was working. Something happened.
What was the Jalen Carter criticism before the draft?
Well, I mean, that was around what was
it?
That was the driving.
There was an immaturity aspect of, and then there was also, we don't know how hard he's going to play when it comes to this, that, and the other, right? Like,
no, I don't know about that. I think it was much more to do with the actual incident.
Yeah, of course it was the incident, but I'm saying that there was another angle to it. What was he takes plays off, like that was a
they
thing
were
that was said.
10-1. Something occurred.
I'm saying if you're looking at the 10-1, I get it. 10-1 is a legit record, right? But I also remember the Pittsburgh Steelers team that was 12-0, and everyone knew they weren't fucking 12-0. And me is like, every time I saw that Eagles team, and I'm looking through the course of the season, the only really impressive win to me over the course of it, where it was like, okay, maybe they did something, was the Miami win. And I got to look at that one to see who was injured or who wasn't as far as Miami in that game. But outside of that, they won a lot of those games closely. And I get it. There's a portion of that like, you got to win however you got to win, right? But it's a difference between teams that, like that Philadelphia team last year smoked teams. They smoked them. Like there was an element of this guy. And the thing is, when you win close like that time after time, in this in almost like a laissez-faire sort of attitude, there is sort of this thing just comes automatic to us. It's like it almost feels like the tush-push aspect of it, which got stopped in the Tampa Bay game. I thought that in a microcosm was it. You had a team that thought they were easy coasting, that didn't realize, hey guys, you got to work at it.
I haven't dove into Jalen Hurts' numbers, but it also has to be said because it is part of the story. San Francisco, when they smoked Philadelphia the way they did, and then Nick Bosa after the game says, hey, this is what Jalen likes to do, and we put it on film. This Eagles team won one game after that. One. They lost 6 after that. So I don't know if if they literally put it out so clearly, it's a multitude of things to me, but that they put it out so clearly that it's like, oh, this is what you do against Jalen, and it just works. Like, or if it's coaching, or if something happened between some players over that, they look like they genuinely dislike each other near the end of this season. It could just be frustration, a bunch of people wanting to win. I don't know. It's just it seems to be an incredibly exceptional case where a team starts so strong, and yes, the games were close, but they were still against good teams, and some of those were on the road. And so, like, it very unique case. I want to get to Dallas, unless you have any final thoughts on Philly, but I feel like we've exhausted that.
I don't give a shit about.
How do you feel about them keeping Mike McCarthy? Because that seems to be more 50-50 split now. So some people are like, hey, continuity is super important. Mike has won. He's got a great record. Mike McCarthy does have a great record. He's won 12 games the last 3 years in the regular season. What do you make of them keeping him?
I think I was on the record saying that if I think the correct choice is to keep Mike McCarthy. And I was also afraid, like you were, that Bill Belichick might come to town. So the idea as far as Mike McCarthy goes is that Commanders fans are too emotional about stuff, but Cowboys fans are fucking stupid. They're just dumb. So like you won 12 games 3 years in a row. 3 years in a row. That's impressive as fuck, right? Like, and you're also coming off a season where Dak Prescott had the best year of his career, right? Let's take a look at what went wrong. Tony Pollard is not an every down back. Was he an upgrade over Zeke? Yeah. But every one of those teams that have a scat back like that needs a bruising power back to wear down a defense. They don't have that.
Could be Derrick Henry.
So, like, to me, if you put a Derrick Henry on this team running the same sort of shit that they're running right now, but with a bruising running element, they're a Super Bowl contender again. So, like, I think, like, I wanted them to fire Mike McCarthy and just do something stupid. But, like, to me, the only two potential things that I could look at as far as an upgrade would be Mike Vrabel or Bill Belichick. And that's just me thinking that they are better quality guys than Mike McCarthy.
Right.
That also being said, what McCarthy's done with this team is still impressive as fuck. And I still think with this current iteration of the team, with a few changes, could absolutely win a Super Bowl.
No doubt about it. I think it's, for me, KDot, it's the way. So it's not just the numbers. It's the way they've lost the last 2 rounds, right? So they had the clock management issue against San Francisco at home, where they didn't get enough time to run the final play. Like, that is, in the playoffs, insane for that to even occur. And by the way, it almost occurred again when they threw CeeDee Lamb short of the sticks. If not for that flag, it would have been 27-0 entering the break. So, like, there are certain moments where I think once you get enough of the regular season success and you're not getting the playoff success, those suddenly become, it feels like, 2 different sports for this Dallas team, where the history begins to weigh on them. Right. People talk about momentum, and it didn't feel more clear to me than when I watched that game, because some people say momentum doesn't exist. I think that's absolute bullshit.
It is.
Momentum to me is when you are in your bag. That's one, which that can happen. But the other thing that occurs, which aids you, the other team gets tense. And when you get tense and you're not relaxed, your mechanics get affected. The way you run routes gets affected. Your body language is affected. The way you block is affected. Being tense and playing a sport at a high level, even a high enough level. You can see this in college as well. March Madness, for example. These kids get tense. That's why you see the madness, is because it's easier for nerves to get to them. And what I'm seeing from Dallas is amateur shit, right? Which is they are getting tense. So I think running it back, good. I mean, from a continuity standpoint, and I think they are capable of getting a bit further, but I'm not sure they're getting past the divisional round. I mean, Matt LaFleur is now in the division with a young Green Bay Packers team that you can now have reasonable expectations on being able to go further. San Francisco's, where are they going? I mean, they're going to be there. Then you've got, let's see what happens with Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
This Philly team, we agree, is very talented. Maybe it was a one-off. I don't know. But this NFC it's not getting any easier. So I'm struggling to sort of see that path. And that's why this iteration of the offseason, more than any, I don't think people are necessarily calling for McCarthy. If Belichick, Harbaugh, Vrabel, etc., this is a world-class group of coaches.
No, they're calling for him. They're still going. They're Cowboys fans,
but there are no options. But there are no options at that point.
The thing is that their playoff woes go so far beyond anything that has to do with Mike McCarthy. If you look back at the Romo years or the Quincy Carter year, anything, right? This has been sustained. This is what they do. It's why
and Jerry, we talk about ownership. We talk about ownership,
right? Like, if there's any takeaways that you can imagine in that facility every day, it's all throughout the season. Regardless of what success or anything they're having, you better do it in the playoffs. 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 You better do it. But if you have that sitting around in your head, it becomes the same thing you said about Josh Allen, right? You can't even be trusted because I know that that's the only thing you're thinking about.
Exactly. And there comes a moment, and it was a golden opportunity to get one step closer to exercising those playoff demons. And the way it happened made it so much worse.
Because they're missing you put a Derrick Henry on there where it comes playoff time where you don't have to think about anything. It's just hand the fucking ball and let's wear down that defense.
I think it helps. I think they
it's-
also need guys that have won the Super Bowl. Like they're going to also need some veteran leaders at this point. When they look at their offseason, it can't just be Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is going to help them big time if they choose to do that, and Derrick is interested in going there. They need guys that have won the fucking thing so that once they get to the playoffs, you lean on them. Because Dak, I think, needs help psychologically. Can't believe we're saying this in a Commanders podcast, but just as NFL fans, like, he needs psychological help at this point. And once he gets it, getting that veteran leader can help.
I'll tell you right now, you know what I would do if I'm Cowboys, like if I'm being completely honest? I'd fire Dan Quinn and hire Wink Martindale.
Well, hopefully you don't even need to do that. Dan gets the Seattle job, and then you just...
No, I'm not waiting. I'll fire him. Because we not mentioning what it is that Jordan fucking Love did to them? Like,
I know that.
Like, that's to me is like, what? And then also to me, I get the holding penalties and stuff though. Micah Parsons is the closest thing we've had in the NFL since Lawrence Taylor. And I'm sorry, I get that he's been incredible. I get it, but I still haven't seen. He could be better. He could be even better.
He can. Certainly. But anyway, we're running up against that hard stop now, so we got to go. But we hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we will see you next week. Till then, take it easy.
In DC, we're just hoping that you listen.